Okay, so this tutorial is going to show you how to set up a palette for oil painting. This is a completely personal choice. I'm just going to show you the way that I set mine up so that you kind of have a starting point and you can sort of develop your own way after you kind of figure out what you like and what you don't like about it. So I like to put most of the colors that I may use on the palette to start with. Otherwise, I may end up getting lazy with my color mixing later, like think about, oh, I would generally mix with this color, but I don't have it, so I'll use this color instead. So I might end up limiting my choices. I also put my colors in the same place every time, and then the more you paint, the more it's kind of intuitive. Like you start mixing colors without realizing even what you're doing. You're just used to mixing those two colors together. So I start with my warm colors at the top. So I've got alizarin crimson, some form of red. This one happens to be cadmium red hue. Some form of orange. You don't necessarily need a yellow orangish hue, but sometimes I have that one. This is just a regular yellow, but if you had a yellow orange, I would probably put it here, but you can mix these two to get that. And I probably don't need both of these yellows, but I have them, so I'm going to use them. This one's a little bit lighter. And then I start putting my greens over on this side. Sap green is one of my favorite greens, and this mixed with alizarin crimson tends to make a really nice brown, a good shadow. And then I start my blues here and start moving my cool colors around this way. I've got phthalo blue here, which is a little bit more of a bluish green. And then I've got a pretty standard blue, French ultramarine or ultramarine blue. Sometimes I would have some sort of cobalt here. I don't have one today. I do not use any black. I find that it flattens out the painting. It looks less realistic, less three-dimensional. So if you ever see anything that I've painted that looks black, it is probably ultramarine mixed with a cool brown like raw umber or burnt umber. And I'll show you that when I put that on here.
And this is just optional, that's how you do it, right?
Yes, you could totally change anything about this. And then I tend to put my browns and then white and flesh tint up here. So this is yellow ochre. If I had Naples yellow, I would also put that up here. Yellow ochre I tend to mix with a lot of different things for skin tones, which is why I like to have it up here. And then this is raw sienna and burnt sienna. Both of these are a warmer brown. And then my cooler browns, probably don't need both of these, but one's burnt umber, one's raw umber. I'm just going to put burnt umber on here today. And then we have a very large tube of white because you tend to use more white than anything else. All right, so this is oil paint. Anything that you mix with your oil paint is called a medium. The medium that we have in this class, and my personal favorite medium, is called liquid. I like it because you can mix as much as you want with the paint and not worry about it. So you can thin it out to where it's what they call a glaze. So I'll show you what that looks like real quick. A glaze is kind of like, you would call it a wash with acrylic. So with acrylic, you would mix it with a lot of water and you can see the layer underneath it. So let's say I'm gonna put like a blue glaze right over this pink here. If I've got some French ultramarine, I can mix as much liquid in as I want to thin it out. It's kind of like you would mix with water with acrylic, but you can't mix water with oil because oil and water don't mix. So you've got to use the liquid instead. So if I did just a blue glaze, you can see right underneath that. So you can mix a ton of different layers of glazes on top of each other until they blend together and you see through them. So when that dries, you could put another glaze on top. Some people will do an underpainting, so they'll do their whole painting in a value. So it could be like brown and white, or black and white, gray and white, and paint the whole thing with all the light and dark values and then do glazes of color on top. That's one way to paint. So I can also, if I want to use just straight paint, I can, and it's a little thicker, and it can completely cover what's underneath. Or if you're trying to get it to drag more, you can just add like a tiny little bit of liquid to it, mix it around on your palette. It just depends on how thick it is that you want it to be. So the more liquid you use, the thinner it's going to be. So the reason that I have the turpenoid over here is to clean my brush like you would use with water. Put some paper towels here. Don't get them all bunched up or you're going to get paint everywhere. It's better to keep it flat and just kind of twist your brush on it. Wipe as much paint off your brush, stir it around in your turpenoid, and wipe it off again. If there's still some paint on here, it's okay. The oil paint is thick enough that it'll cover it up. So let's say I want to switch to a really light yellow. Notice that I'm always using the lightest color first and adding the next color to it. So if I'm painting something that's a really light yellow, see, I don't really have any trace of that blue left. And I didn't like super clean it. I just barely wiped it off a little bit. One thing to know is this is going to stay wet all day. So if you're strategic about how you're using your palette, anytime you're trying to mix a white and a yellow, you can leave that area there. If I'm going to make a skin tone, oh, I forgot to put this out here. This is a flesh tint. So if you're painting a portrait, you may end up using a lot of this. But let's say that I'm painting, I don't know, like a light tan kind of flesh tone. I may start with that and go here and realize, okay, I need to lighten it up some. Maybe there's a little bit of a green tone to it. Let's add some green to it. Maybe it's a little bit too warm. I can add some cooler brown. Just go back and forth until you're getting it where you want it to go. And then maybe you're painting your portrait over here and you realize, okay, this area of the skin over here is just a little bit pinker. I can just add that to what I already mixed and then go over here. This will stay wet at least the whole day that you're working on it. So you can continue to blend and control your edges that way, which is really nice with oil paint. I think it's a lot easier to use than acrylic because of that. So these are the two different mediums we're using. There are a ton of different mediums out there, so if you get into oil paint, you can test those out. The good thing about liquid is you can add as much as you want, there's no problem. There's some other mediums out there where if you add too much, it'll yellow or crack later on down the line. So liquid is a good starter medium to use. The turpenoid, it can be used as a medium, but I'm really just using it as a cleanser here. You can put lids on this and save it. This can be sealed in one of these airtight lids and the paint can be saved so that it can last several days. The other thing about these paints are that some of the pigments dry faster than others. So you may realize that like these three paints are super wet in 2 days, whereas the raw umber may be dry and you may need a little bit more of that. So you can just squirt out a little bit more onto the palette. Also, when you're completely done with this palette, all the paint's dry, you've mixed stuff everywhere, it's driving you nuts, you need a new one. These are disposable. You can just tear this sheet off, throw it away, you've got one underneath it. It's easy to clean up. Oh, the other thing, cleaning your brushes. When you're done, it's probably going to take you a good 10 minutes to clean up at the end of the class. So make sure you squeeze off as much paint in the paper towel as you can, and you would probably have to wash a paintbrush this size like 3 or 4 times at least with the dish detergent soap in order to get enough of the paint out. You can see it kind of running clear afterwards, and you want to put Vaseline on it afterwards to help make the brushes last longer.